All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are locked on Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman. And today we are continuing our series previewing each position group, talking about the offensive line and its main storylines heading into training camp, whether or not this offensive line will get significantly better, and whether or not we will have three new starters on the offensive line come week one.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me, I'm Aaron Freeman, been covering the Falcons for many years, formerly at falcfans.com, RIP, still going strong on Twitter at Falcfans, and of course, the host of this distinguished Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family. And I want to thank everyone that makes Locked On Falcons their first listen each and every day. Locked On Falcons is, of course, free and available on a variety of podcast platforms Monday through Friday, whether you want to check us out on Apple, Odyssey, Google, or Spotify. You can also check us out on YouTube. And if you subscribe to Locked On Falcons on YouTube, you'll get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. So, guys, today we're continuing our series of training camp previews going position by position. We are wrapping up the offense today with the offensive line group. We'll do as we have done, with the previous positions, talking about sort of the big question of the season, the big question of the summer, and what other, conversations are pertaining to each position group. And today's going to be an interesting show because I'm turning over a new leaf, right? In trying to answer the question of whether or not the biggest question for the Falcons offensive line is how much better is this unit going to be this season. And so we're going to switch things up. I said this earlier this offseason, I was going to be more positive or whatever the case may be. I don't know if I'll be more positive, but like I've decided not to be as miserable in my skepticism and my negativity moving forward, because part of it has been, you know, thinking about this offensive line for like the last 48 hours and sort of like, am I just going to come on the podcast and just complain about the offensive line for 45 minutes and tell you how terrible it is? And I'm like, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a effort to, I'm going to convince you guys. My goal today is that by 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes into this episode, I will make you 15%. I will convince you that this offensive line will be better by at least 15% this year. That is my mission for today. And, I sat here these last couple of days thinking about this offensive line, and I came to the realization, and part of this revelation for me is the realization that the root of my skepticism is centered on this offensive line. Like I sat here at the end of last season and basically said, you know, the one thing that this regime can do to win me over is fix the offensive line. That if they fix the offensive line, good things will happen. And then we watched them this offseason, make minimal efforts to fix the offensive line. And that's sort of the root of my skepticism as we sit here and I go through this therapy session every single day on the Locked On Falcons podcast. And, it's frustrating for me just because, like, I see when I watch the film, and, that's something I do from time to time as I watch film. I got to always remind you guys of that. But, I watched the film and I'm like, man, if this offensive line was good, all my criticism of Arthur Smith's offense, all these various things, like their identity is wrapped up in being a physical football team. And I know a lot of people over the last several months have been, talking about how much more physical we're going to be because, we got wide receivers that are like 2 inches taller, or we got a linebacker that's an inch taller, and we're going to be so much more physical. And I just kind of roll my eyes at that. But like, we all sit here and know that if you want to be a physical football team, you have to do it in the trenches. It ain't about, your skill position players being slightly taller than the opposing team's skill position players. That doesn't make you a physical football team. And so that's why it's kind of frustrating to me that the offensive line hasn't been significantly addressed. But like, look, I hope they're going to be better. We're going to sit here and expect them to be better. It's just a question of how much better. And a big part of how much better this offensive line is going to be is hinging on offensive line coach Dwayne Ledford, right? We're not expecting Dwayne Ledford to be this miracle worker or anything like that. But, I think there's reasons for optimism, right? And the reason for optimism surrounding Dwayne Ledford is that he's reputed to be the Alex Gibbs of, college football, right? And now he's just going to have to be Alex Gibbs 2.0 at least of the NFL moving forward with implementing this outside zone blocking scheme that the Falcons love to run. And there are glimmers of hope with some of the questionable spots on the offensive line. We're looking at left guard, we're looking at center, we're looking at right tackle. Let's start with the biggest question mark, which is the left guard position, where Jayla Mayfield resides. And there's a glimmer of hope with Jayla Mayfield, right? That glimmer of hope is based off of the idea that he did get better over the course of his rookie season, right? If you look at him in September versus in December, he was a better player in December, right? In September, according to PFF, he had a 31 overall grade and a 20 pass blocking grade. In December, he had a 48 overall grade and a 30 pass blocking grade. So that is progress, guys. Right. And that's reminiscent, at least in December, comparable to what we saw from James Carpenter in 2019. When you guys, if you were listening to the podcast, but back then you heard me constantly complaining about how bad James Carpenter was. But James Carpenter in 2019 at the left guard position had a 46 overall grade and a 46 pass blocking grade. So, Jalen Mayfield's getting there, overall and whatnot. He can be James Carpenter good, right? And normally that would be, grounds for ridicule here on Locked On Falcons, but beggars can't be choosers, as I often say when we have any conversations about the Falcons trench situation. And I think it's realistic that Jaylen Mayfield could get to James Carpenter's level or possibly even beyond that. And if he does get beyond it, if he gets to Jamon Brown's level, who's slightly better than James Carpenter, okay, that maybe mean that Dwayne Ledford's, coaching him up a little. And even if he gets beyond Jamon Brown's level, what about if he gets to, Wes Schweitzer level? Okay. We got these nostalgia goggles when it comes to Wes Schweitzer. At the time when he was starting here at left guard, we were like, we could do a lot better than that. But now we're like, hey, remember when we had a halfway decent, almost kind of okay left guard and Wes Schweitzer? If Jayla Mayfield can get to Wes Schweitzer level, then we know that, Dwayne Ledford was in his bag when it came to the coaching standpoint. Then you look at the other big question mark, the right tackle position, the other position that other people like to complain about. And yeah, guys, we're going to take a trip back to McGarry Island. It sucks here. I've sent an SOS. There's a weird smell. I don't know what that noise is at night when I'm laying my head down to sleep in the bed. It's a rough place to be. I want to get off this island, but you know what? Maybe they're renovating some things. Maybe things are getting better on Kaleb McGary Island because there's signs, again, glimmers of hope here for improvement for this offensive line because Kaleb McGary was actually decent last year against NFC South pass rushers. Brian Burns, Cam Jordan, Shaq Barrett, those guys had a group chat in the 2 previous years where they would just post Kaleb McGary memes of how terrible he was and how much they were working him over week after week after week. But last year, for the most part, he did fine against all those guys. I won't say he did good, but he did fine. They were not major issues in most of those games that the Falcons played against their NFC South opponents. Hassan Reddick was, and that gets to the point that the only issue with Kaleb McGary last year, or not the only issue, but one of the bigger issues with Kaleb McGary was he was fine against the NFC South guys, but not good against non-NFC South guys, Hassan Reddick, or at least the guys that he wasn't used to in the NFC South, like Hassan Reddick. Nick Bosa also tore him a new one. Matt Judon, embarrassed him a couple of times. And that's a switch from previous years where Kaleb McGary was terrible against the NFC South guys. They're in their group chat and whatnot. And, he was okay. I'm not going to say good, okay against the non-NFC South guys. And so now we just need Kaleb McGary to marry those two things. Take his NFC South play from 2021 and marry that with, say, his 2020 non-NFC South play. And all of a sudden you got a decent, and again, not good, but a decent, starting right tackle for yourself. And you may not be as miserable on Kaleb McGary Island if you happen to join me. You may not need to call that SOS and get rescued off of this island. And then you're also kind of looking across the water and you're going, okay, is Ifedi Island a little bit better? We'll circle back to that. But it's important that Kaleb McGary steps up. He has to step up, right? He's playing for his NFL future. Guys, this is a contract year for him. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, that his lack of positional versatility is he has to make it as a right tackle. And if he can't show this year that he's a halfway decent starting right tackle that deserves to get a second contract from somebody, he may be out of the league within a year or two, guys. So he's got to play for his NFL future, and hopefully that will inspire him to be better. And so potentially 2 of the 3 problem areas could be better. We'll talk about the third area in the center position as we continue today's conversation, getting into the biggest question of the summer and focusing in on these key positional battles. That's where we'll talk about Mcgarry versus Ifedi Island and those dueling resorts. We'll talk about the center position. We'll talk about whether or not there's serious challenges for Jalen Mayfield at that left guard position to inspire this improvement that we're hoping to build towards. But we'll get into that as we continue today's episode, guys. But before we get there, I do want to tell you about the folks at Rock Auto. You know, with ever increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why wait while the person behind the counter orders parts on their computer when you already have access to rockauto.com at home or in your pocket? Save time and money when using Rock Auto instead of spending up to twice as much for the same parts from a car dealership or chain store. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years with reliably low prices for every single customer. They have everything you need from brake polish, tail lamps, motor oil, even new carpet. Just go to rockauto.com, browse their easy-to-use website, and see all the parts available for your car or truck. And when you do, write Locked On in the How Did You Hear About Us box so that they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So the biggest question of the summer is looking at these key positional battles, right? Are we going to have new starters week one at center, at left guard, at right tackle? Let's talk about center. Because center is interesting, right? We have the Matt Hennessy versus the Drew Dalman competition. And it's funny because, like, I think if we invented a time machine and went back to December, right? And we asked Falcon fans, of these three shaky positions, which of these incumbents, Jayla Mayfield, Matt Hennessy, or Kaleb McGary, should be on the shakiest ground going into training camp? I think most people probably wouldn't have picked Matt Hennessy. They probably would have picked Jalen Mayfield. They probably would have put Kaleb McGary. Now, if we, there was a mistake in the time travel and we went back to the November, the week after the Patriots game, then I think everybody probably would have said Matt Hennessy then. But, for the most part, I think most people were like, okay, like Hennessy wasn't good, but like he might be okay. But it's funny because now we're, practically in July at this point in time, and he's probably the guy on the shakiest ground among these three starters. It seems like, with Drew Dalman giving him legit competition. And, it's interesting because back in January, when I went back and rewatched the offensive line, I came away kind of impressed with Drew Dalman because I had forgotten he'd played in that week one game at left guard, got 7 snaps there, thought he did pretty well. We watched Javon Hargrave absolutely wreck Jalen Mayfield in that game, and, Drew Dalman held his own. Right. Then we saw later in the season against Jacksonville where he was rotating with Matt Hennessy at center. I thought he actually outplayed Matt Hennessy in that game. And then we saw the Tampa Bay game and then was like, okay, well, the Drew Dalman hype train kind of got derailed after that game. But, I can imagine a scenario, the 3 out of 4 ain't bad, right? Or 2 out of 3 ain't bad, I guess, at this point in time, that could inspire hope that Drew Dalman is potentially an upgrade over Matt Hennessy. And the thing I like about Drew Dalman is he's kind of a dirtbag, right? And I mean that in an affectionate way, kind of like how Joe Hawley was a dirtbag, right? Or at least that's what Justin Tuck labeled Joe Hawley prior to that 2011 playoff game, that unfortunate playoff game against the Giants. But, I kind of like having that type of player at the center position. If we're not going to have a good offensive line, and again, I'm not convincing you guys that we're going to have a good offensive line. It's still going to be well below average, right? It's just maybe better. That's what it's not good. Better does not equal good. We're going to be better. But let's get some dirtbags out there. Let's make it fun, right? That's really the theme of, turning over this new leaf here on Locked On Falcons. Let's have a little bit more fun with this. Right. And then you sort of look at that. Okay, Drew Dalman could leapfrog Matt Hennessy, but Matt Hennessy's kind of an indicator that he's even on shakier ground than we probably thought was the fact that the Falcons went out and signed Jonathan Harrison, a veteran center. Why, do the Falcons need a veteran center? Now, Harrison could be in the mix at left guard, but he spent 85% of his snaps in the NFL, 85% of his snaps in college playing center. So if he was supposed to be left guard competition, wouldn't it make more sense to get someone who's actually a left guard, not someone who's a center that's masquerading as a left guard? So I don't know if Harrison's really in the mix at that left guard position. I'm assuming the Falcons wanted another veteran backup option at the center position. But I sit here and I wonder and I go, wait, but why do you need a veteran center when you have Matt Hennessy? Jonathan Harrison has 38 career starts at center. Matt Hennessy has 19. So Harrison has more experience there, but Harrison's old, he's like in his 30s and Hennessy's, young. So at least there's potential to develop there. So you don't need a veteran center if you already have Matt Hennessy on the roster, is the point I'm trying to make. But then you ask the question, well, what if Matt Hennessy's not on the roster? Then you would need a veteran center in that situation. And that's where, I'm a little bit, maybe, turning over this new leaf here on Locked On Falcons. I'm going more to the conspiracy side of things because, we're talking about Joe Hawley being a dirtbag. It reminds me of how Joe Hawley went into the 2015 summer, you know, pretty much a lock to be the starting center, but then all of a sudden, the Falcons are cutting him at the end of training camp. Now, granted, some of that was injury related. We saw a similar situation happen with John Asamoah, with him going on IR and never playing football again due to a hip injury. But, it's, could we see a major shakeup on this offensive line? Do I think Hennessy's going to get cut or traded at the end of the summer? No, but is it completely out of the realm of possibility? No. Would I sit here and say Matt Hennessy's a lock to make the roster? I would say no. And it's a similar situation with Kaleb McGary at the right tackle competition, right? Now we're talking about him competing with Germain Ifedi, and we're talking about Kaleb McGary getting better, but it's possible that Germain Ifedi is a better option than Kaleb McGary, because if you look at Germain Ifedi and the 14 starts he's made at right tackle over the last 2 seasons with the Chicago Bears, he was, at least from his PFF grades, he was a league average pass protection, which is an improvement over what Kaleb McGary has been over the last couple of years. Now, Ifedi's run blocking wasn't great. That was kind of the strength of Kaleb McGary. And, given the identity Arthur Smith wants, maybe he leans in McGary's favor because you get better run blocking with less pass protection, or maybe you lean in the Ifedi direction if you want that pass protection, particularly if you want to give Marcus Mariota more opportunities to escape the pocket, and you can have that anchor point on the outside that Ifedi potentially gives you. So, we'll see if Ifedi can prove to be that upgrade or not. But I look at the situation with him and Kaleb McGary, and I sit here and I go, like, I don't think either one of those guys is guaranteed to make the roster either, right? Because the assumption is going to be that whoever loses that competition at right tackle for the starting spot there is going to be the, default swing tackle. But then you sit there and go, like, does that really make sense? Because Germain Ifedi has never played on the left side of, the offensive line, right? Your swing tackle needs to be able to play left tackle or right tackle, right? Right. And so Germain Ifedi spent his entire college career playing right guard or right tackle, his entire NFL career playing right guard or right tackle. Kaleb McGary spent his entire college career and NFL career playing right tackle. They don't have the positional flexibility, right? So in the event that Jake Matthews gets injured, say, trying to block Myles Garrett in week 4 this upcoming season, tweaks his ankle and has to miss, a quarter or 2 in that game, and you need to insert a left tackle into the game, are you going to put Kaleb McGary in the game or Germain Ifedi in the game at that point in time, basically playing left tackle for the first time in their careers? Okay, maybe they get some reps during the summer, but like, a month of playing left tackle, a month of practice reps at left tackle is enough for you to feel comfortable about that guy stepping in and blocking Myles Garrett. Well, granted, you're not comfortable with anybody stepping in and blocking Myles Garrett except for maybe like Trent Williams. But other than that, or David Bakhtiari or somebody like that, but we get it. You know what I'm saying? So I sit here and I go, like, the loser of that right tackle competition, all that to sit here and say, could be find themselves out of a job by the end of the summer because they don't have the positional flexibility to be a swing tackle. You're just, if you're Germain Ifedi, you can be a backup to both Chris Lindstrom and Kaleb McGary, but that's it. If you're Kaleb McGary, you're just a backup to Germain Ifedi. And so I sit here and I go, like, the only point, why not shop that guy at the end of the summer if he loses the competition? You're not keeping him. Fetty's on a 1-year contract. McGary's in a contract year. They're, the loser of that battle presumably is not going to be a Falcon in 2023. Now there's certainly a chance that maybe mid-season you decide that whoever won the competition is struggling. You might want to insert the other guy into, lineup to shake things up, whatever the case may be. Maybe, hold out for the thin hope that the loser of that competition, sits on the bench all season long, hits free agency next year. You get a comp pick for him, a late round comp pick or something like that. But that's really the only upside. So I sit here and I go, if whoever loses that competition, cut him, trade him, whatever. Doesn't matter. Let's shake things up. Right. And then we get to the left guard position. And, we have the possibility with center, Drew Dalman, Jonathan Harrison could push Matt Hennessy off the roster. Right tackle, Germain Ifedi could push Kaleb McGary off the roster. And then you look at the left guard competition and you're just like, crickets, like what's going on? Nothing. There's no serious competition for Jayla Mayfield. And, I may be turning a new leaf here on Locked On Falcons, or trying to turn a new leaf here on Locked On Falcons, but, I'm still a cynic at heart, guys. And I sit here and I go, oh, of course, yeah. They didn't bring in real competition for their guy so that when Jayla Mayfield wins the competition, later this summer, they can sit here and say, see, our guy got better. And then meanwhile, they're cutting, Dan Quinn and Thomas Dimitroff's guys, Hennessy and Mcgarry, who got drafted by the old regime or whatever the case may be. So they bring serious competition for those guys, but no serious competition for Jayla Mayfield, right? And, we look at Elijah Wilkinson, who was getting the majority of, second team left guard snaps at OTAs and mini camp and whatever the case may be. Elijah Wilkinson's never played a single snap in an NFL game, preseason or regular season, at left guard, right? So that's not real competition for Jayla Mayfield, right? Now, maybe we see real competition added later this summer. I know we're still holding out hope for some veteran additions. We're holding out hope that the Falcons are adding, something more than Jonathan Harrison, in terms of their center depth and competition there, maybe a Quentin Spain or whatever the case may be. But I sit here and I go, we're shaking things up at center. We're shaking things up at right tackle. Why not shake things up at left guard? Again, maybe Jalen Mayfield's better. Maybe he's James Carpenter good. Maybe he's better than that. But I look at this roster and I say, like, there's other players on this roster that should be James Carpenter or good or better. Jonathan Harrison, again, going back to him, he's not a real center, but like, can he do better than a 30 pass blocking grade? I hope so. Right? He's got 4 career starts at left guard going back to 2016 with the Colts. You got Colby Gossett, who was the backup last year, started a game last year at left guard when Mayfield was out in that Week 18 game, has 5 career starts at left guard. So he's actually the more experienced guy. Is he going to be serious competition? I thought Gossett, is not going to be great, but I saw some flashes from him in Cleveland that make me feel like he could be okay, James Carpenter-esque in this offense. And we talk about Justin Shaffer. We talked about Justin Shaffer. I didn't paint a positive portrait of Justin Shaffer in that scouting report, but now I'm just sort of thinking about it after thinking about this offensive line. I'm like, why not throw Justin Shaffer out there? Is he going to be good? No. He's going to get his butt kicked? Absolutely. But at least he's mean, right? At least he's an a-hole, and I mean that affectionately, right? He plays mean. Like, that was one of the things that people said about Jalen Mayfield. Oh, he's tough, he's mean, he's got that, he's got that edge to him. Like, no, Justin Shaffer's got an edge to him. Like, he puts Jalen Mayfield's edge, to shame in that regard. And so, yeah, whoever's going to start left guard, they got David Onyemata week 1, they got Aaron Donald week 2. That guy's going to get wrecked. Doesn't matter who the Falcons throw out there, but why not shake things up, right? At least if you throw out Justin Shaffer out there, he'll get mad about it, right? When he gets absolutely wrecked by Aaron Donald and David Onyemata for like 7 sacks in the first 2 games or whatever that number is, like, he'll get mad about it. I'm watching Senior Bowl one-on-ones and I'm watching him get ticked off every time he loses a rep or whatever the case may be. So I'll take that over, whatever we got from Jayla Mayfield last year or whatever we'll get from Jayla Mayfield this year. So I'm at this point, like, let's just shake things up, right? It's like, if you ever found a bug and you put it in a jar, like a mason jar, and just shook it up real fast, you never done that? Yeah. I've never done that either. That's only things that like serial killers do. Yeah. I haven't done that, so, but hypothetically, if you were to do that and you, like, say you found a roach or something, you put it in a jar and you shook it up real fast, and then you put them back in the kitchen floor and you just said, like, tell your friends about me, right? That's what happens, Larry, when you find a stranger in the Alps, that's what I would do. But, just hypothetically speaking, that's not crazy or anything like that. But, I'm hoping by now, guys, I've sold you. Maybe you're 15% better about the offensive line. Did I accomplish my goal? You guys tell me in the comments or whatever the case may be. But I think we know that we're gonna have a brand new right tackle in 2023. In all likelihood, we're probably gonna have a brand new left guard. Although, again, my cynicism is like, they'll probably find a way. Like, well, Jalen Mayfield got better each year. Well, let's go and let's see what I'm sure I'm looking forward to that conversation next offseason. And then, maybe we have the long-term option at center on the roster already, whether it's Drew Dalman, whether it's Matt Hennessy, or whatever the case may be. My last point I'll make before we move on and get off of these conspiracies and statements or whatever the case may be. But, the plan C at center for me, at least, okay, you give Dalman a year, you give Hennessy another year, whatever, who cares? And then, let's shake things up next year. And, if they don't work out, if you're not feeling good about that center position, let's go back to something I suggested back in the 2019 draft, or after the 2019 draft, when I was talking to Chris Lindstrom, and I'm like, hey, he could be a halfway decent Alex Mack replacement if the player that you wind up picking, in our case, Matt Hennessy, potentially Drew Dalman, doesn't end up working out. You know, you need a good center to have a good offensive line. That's just a fact, right? You need a good quarterback to have a good offense, right? You need a good center to have a good offensive line. And so I'm sitting here going, like, if you can't find that problem, if you can't solve that problem in the draft or in free agency or whatever the case may be next offseason, then, you know, why not kick Chris Lindstrom over to center and see what he can do? And hopefully you can find a halfway decent right guard replacement. Obviously, for the time being, we need a good guard. But you know, I'm just saying, plant that seed for future. You know, we'll plant that conversation maybe till 6 months from now, but just planting that seed. So, you know, if someone else is saying something similar like that and be like, I wonder who was talking about that in June, but I'll just lay that out there for now, but we'll move on and get into, you know, some of these remaining roster battles. We got to talk about every offensive lineman. So we'll get into, like, you know, if Germain Ifedi is not going to be the swing tackle, then who is, right? And then we'll talk about maybe some of these other developmental guys, and we'll talk about Jake Matthews. We haven't talked about Jake Matthews. That was my Chris Lindstrom segment of the day. We know he's good. But we'll get into all of that to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons podcast. But before we get there, guys, I do want to tell you about the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family, where you can find 3 shows hosted by 4 people giving you their perspective on local sports as well as national sports. That's Hitting Hard with John Chuckery, ATL Day Ones with Jarvis Davis and Tanitra Batiste, and A to Z with Mark Zeno. Find them all on the same podcast feed, whether it's Apple, Odyssey, Google, or Spotify, or on YouTube. And if you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube, you also can check out the Locked On Braves postcast, breaking down every Atlanta Braves win and loss. And guys, I want to tell you about the folks at betonline.net, right? They're your number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. Whether you want to bet on the Atlanta Braves and other Major League Baseball teams, whether you want to bet on Wimbledon, whether you want to bet on UFC, boxing, esports, Vegas casino games, you want to bet on NFL prop bets, NBA prop bets, NHL prop bets, you can bet them all at betonline.net. You want to bet on each league's MVP, each league's, you know, championship team. You know, you want to bet the over under on Falcons wins. You know, maybe you're feeling better about betting the over on the Falcons 4.5 win total this season after today's episode. You can find it all by heading over to betonline.net to check out more of the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So let's talk about the last couple of roster battles on the offensive line group. And, you know, that battle for a swing tackle is going to be an interesting one because, you know, as I said earlier, whoever is the loser of the right tackle position technically probably won't be the swing tackle. It's going to be whoever is getting the majority of those second team reps at the left tackle position. And presumably that will be Rick Leonard. At least that's what it was in OTAs and minicamp. Maybe Elijah Wilkinson gets some run there. He does have a little bit of experience playing left tackle, so he's probably the prime candidate to push Rick Leonard. We'll see about that. Tyler Vrabel is another interesting name to throw his hat in the ring. And, you know, I sit here and I go, I don't know if Tyler Vrabel is going to make the roster, but he's guaranteed to make at least a practice squad because there's no way that Arthur Smith is going to cut Mike Vrabel's son, right? Mike Vrabel is Arthur Smith's boy. You know, the whole reason why we drafted, like, Arthur Smith loves Mike Vrabel so much that's the reason why they drafted Desmond Ridder. Again, the cynic Aaron is still here. But, you know, Desmond Ridder was coached by Luke Fickell, Cincinnati head coach. You know who's old friends with Luke Fickell? Mike Vrabel, because they played almost 30 years ago together at Ohio State. They coached together 10 years ago on those Urban Meyer Ohio State coaching staffs. And so basically, again, getting back into conspiracies, you know, I think the Falcons and Titans kind of colluded, right? You know, they were like, okay, Falcons, we need a quarterback right away. Titans, you know, you're the number 1 seed. You don't need a quarterback immediately. So you guys get Desmond Ridder. We'll take Malik Willis. And the Falcons are like, yeah, so we agree to the terms of this or whatever the case may be. So all of this conspiracy mongering to basically present you, there's no way, 0% chance that Tyler Vrabel is not at the very least on the practice squad this year. I don't have a good bet to predict him to make the roster because when I watched him at Boston College, when I was watching, you know, Zion Johnson and Alec Lindstrom, what little I watched of them, I didn't watch a ton of those guys just because I kind of knew that we weren't going to draft them. But I did watch a little bit of Tyler Vrabel when I did, and I was like, I don't know if he's that good. I don't know if he's NFL roster worthy, but he'll be in the mix, right? He'll be a developmental option. Another developmental option, at least on the interior of the offensive line, is Ryan Nuzul, who I really liked last summer. The only knock on Ryan Nuzzo, he's got T-Rex arms, but he's in the same mold as Drew Dalman, which is kind of that dirt bag type of player. And again, maybe that arm length is negated if you move him to center. Primarily, he's been a left guard. Another fun developmental guy could be Leroy Watson, who was a tight end at UTSA. And longtime listeners know, going back like 6 years ago, when the Falcons brought in Daniel Brunskill, who was a college tight end at San Diego State, and developed into an offensive tackle here. I was a big fan of Brunskill's potential, and it was one of the reasons why I was very anti Chris Mulligan while I was here, because I'm like, there was so much wasted potential, because Brunskill was one of basically 5 offensive linemen that left Atlanta to San Francisco and got better in San Francisco because, of course, Kyle Shanahan's the only coach we have that actually knows how to evaluate outside zone offensive linemen. It's so baffling to me, and I know some of you guys get mad at me because I'm just some guy on the internet, but I sit here, this is the one area that I can sit here and say that some guy on the internet has legitimately figured it out better than people that are making 6 and 7 figures when it comes to evaluating offensive linemen, because for the life of me, this team has no clue, based off of their moves made over the last 5 years, how to develop players in this blocking scheme. But we'll let Dwayne Ledford. We're hoping that Dwayne Ledford will change the outlook on that, and he'll be in his bag and develop the Ryan Nuzels, the Tyler Vrabels, and all these other guys that we're hoping and expecting big improvements. So we were able to get through 14 out of the 15 offensive line. At least they got a mention on today's episode. So let's talk about Jake Matthews. And I just want to say Jake Matthews is good, right? He's a classic example of what I call the 5-7-9 phenomenon. And that is basically where a lot of fans will, look at a player that's like 5 out of 10, basically an average NFL player, role player, whatever, and they will hype him up to be a 7 out of 10, which is actually a good player and a big time contributor. But then when you have a legit 7, like all they do is complain about, well, he's not a 9 or anything. He's not an elite player or anything like that, And like Jake Matthews is now kind of the current embodiment of that. Austin Hooper was another guy that sort of fit that phenomenon. And I don't know if it's because of his mistakes in the Super Bowl, or people had these expectations that he was going to be a Hall of Famer like his dad. Jake Matthews is far from perfect. His run blocking was atrocious last year. There's no doubt about it. I talked about it quite frequently on the podcast, but my man can pass protect. And when the Falcons offensive line is giving up 50, 60 sacks this year, you're going to appreciate Jake Matthews probably a little bit more. But we'll see how that goes for Jake Matthews. I'm sure there'll be even more scrutiny on him from certain circles within our fan base. Now that he's making roughly $20 million a year, and he needs to be better than this. And it's just like, okay, like sure, this is coming from me, but you sound like a hater. You sound so negative when you talk about Jake Matthews. So that's it, guys. I'm done talking with the offensive line. This sort of change of heart was kind of facilitated by a conversation I had the other day with Alan Stirk, who will be joining me next week when we unveil a new sort of fun series doing the Falcons all-time draft series, where we will, basically having like a dual fantasy style draft, picking only Falcons players from Falcons history to build the best, offense and defense to, see who's got the better team at the end of that. And that'll be a 4-part series that should begin airing Monday or Sunday evening if you're checking us out on YouTube. But in the course of setting up that thing and preparing for that, talking with Alan a little bit more in these recent weeks, he said something to me that was profound, and it was just kind of a run-of-the-mill statement that he probably made, and I'll probably wind up texting him after recording this episode to tell him about it. But he said something that like was profound, and it was like, oh, like and it basically caused me to go down this path and start going through this mental process of just basically like, and every day waking up and arguing in the comments with various folks about the negativity and blah, 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 blah. It gets tiresome. But basically, the thing that Alan kind of got me to think about was like, look, I don't think the team is going to be good, guys. Like, that. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I think, oh, we're going to be good. We're going to be scrappy. I hope we're going to be scrappy, but they're not going to be good. But like, we don't have to be miserable about it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I think that's kind of the influence that Alan was able to have on me. So hopefully we'll see if this holds, right? We'll get back to the D line in in 2 weeks when we get to the camp previews on that side of the ball, and we'll be like, oh well, they're gonna suck. I will make an effort. So basically, I'm at a point where it's like, look, I don't think they're gonna be good. The thing that's getting me excited is tanking. Like, am I allowed to say that? Yeah, don't kill me. But like, let's get a star. Let's be scrappy. Let's be fun. Let's be scrappy. And then let's go get Will Anderson. Let's go get Jalen Carter. Let's go get CJ Stroud or Bryce Young or whoever, that superstar, with that top 5 pick next year. So, and rather than just basically being like, oh, this is a problem or whatever, because look, let's just have fun. Let's watch Marcus Mariota run around, make some plays, and also get sacked 50 times this year. So, we'll have fun. We'll try to have as much fun as we possibly can doing that. So that's going to be my overriding goal. So anytime you guys find me slipping back, let me know in the comments or whatever the case may be. My opinions of the team haven't changed, but I'm trying to get a different perspective on it and like look at it. That's why with the offensive line, it's just like, look, they're going to be bad. It's not going to be a good offensive line, but let's shake things up. Let's see what's going on with this unit. Let's see what, we already saw what that starting 5 had. Let's see if we can get a different starting 5, or at least three new starters, and see what those guys can do. Continuity be damned, or whatever the case may be. So that's kind of my perspective on this offensive line. We'll see how much it carryovers to the other positions as the summer unfolds. But that will do it, guys, for another camp preview. Tomorrow's episode, we will be taking a step back with a more holistic look at the offense and some of these questions that we're asking in each of these episodes about the big question of the season. We'll be talking about sort of which ones are the best bets that we can potentially be making. Like, which of these question marks can we realistically say, okay, I can put like $5 down that this will come true, or I can put $15 or $50 or more dollars and feel comfortable that that's not a bad bet. I'm not wasting money in that regard. So that will be sort of the theme on tomorrow's episode, guys. But I appreciate you for tuning in for another episode here on Locked On Falcons. If you want to provide your feedback on any other topics I discussed, or the new era of Locked On Falcons, which, again, I know some of you like, didn't you say this in May? I'm like, no, I didn't say that. But yeah, you can provide your feedback at lockedonfalcons@mail.com. You can hit me up on Twitter or Facebook at Locked On Falcons, or you can leave a comment here, of course, on the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel. So guys, appreciate it. Till then.